obviously we're going to talk about coffee, but I want to talk about business as well, because you're a business in this industry. Maybe first off, what is the story behind Transcend, your brand, and kind of where you got started?
Yeah, so Transcend, I started Transcend almost 10 years ago, actually. I was a lawyer by trade, so I came to Edmonton in 1996 to go to law school at the University of Alberta, graduated in 99, practiced for 3 years, actually, 2003. I got into a really weird, I worked with Aboriginals and First Nations. I did business law with First Nations, and right around 2000, they announced the gaming policy. And so, of course, every First Nation in the country wanted to have a casino, right? And so I all of a sudden found myself in the world of gaming, casino law. Frankly, I didn't like the practice of law. If anyone wants to be a lawyer, I'll talk to you later and discourage you. It's just, I'm actually speaking to the law school tomorrow. And,
oh, really?
Yeah, they want me to talk about alternative careers with a law degree. And I'm just going to
tell them.
I'm just going to tell them to run away.
Save your time.
It's just a, if your life's goal is to be buried in paper, then you've got a great career.
Okay.
But anyways, so that was my background. And so with coffee, I was consulting, and I wanted to create a space. I'm going to date myself here because none of you have probably watched Cheers. But there was a show on TV years and years ago called Cheers.
How many people know Cheers?
Does anyone know Cheers? A few people.
Right,
Okay. So it was about a bar, and the tagline was "Where everyone knows your name." Right. So I spent 11 years in university, and coffee was always this thing that gathered us together. And what I wanted was to create a space where people could have good conversation. So I somehow convinced my wife to allow me to start a coffee company when I didn't really know anything about coffee. All I knew is what I wanted. I wanted to create a space, and I wanted to do quality because I was a bit of a wine guy, and I had some wine training, and I wanted to do quality. But and I wanted to roast, which was a bad idea as well. I started roasting in my basement with a hot air popcorn popper. And,
really?
Yeah. Yeah. So
how did that work out? Was there good quality coffee with that?
No, not at all.
So this was back in
2006.
2006.
Yeah, like this. That's when we started.
10 years ago.
10 years ago, yeah.
Okay.
I spent 3 months building out our first location in Argyle. So I actually.
In 3 months, you got a location going that quickly.
Yeah, I swung a hammer.
Yeah.
I dug holes.
Right.
It was a good weight loss program. I needed to do it.
Were you at that point thinking, well, I'm going to keep doing this lawyering on the side, or are you going to completely?
I had the
jump?
law thing as a backup.
Yeah.
If I went under.
Okay.
Which I.
It's a nice backup, I guess.
Yeah. So I think about last year, I figured I was safe.
Oh yeah, last year, just 9 years after that. Okay. Years, yeah. All right. So you started this, and you wanted quality. Can you talk more about that? Like, what does that mean in the coffee industry?
One of the things that's really interesting about coffee is that it's a commodity. So if you think about, get your head wrapped around commodity, oil, wheat, corn, pork bellies, those are commodities, and they're traded on the New York Stock Exchange by brokers. And coffee is one of those commodities. It's a $20 billion a year commodity market. If you add value to it, like when you roast it or do something with it, then we're talking $80 billion. But it's a commodity. And on the whole, coffee is not, quality coffee is hard to come by. Coffee normally gets bought and sold in containers, and a container is 37,500 pounds of coffee. So it's not like so when I first got into coffee, I didn't know any of this stuff. And I was buying coffee from importers, obviously in much smaller quantities. Just to put it in context, I don't know how many of you have been to Transcend? Oh, quite a few. Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. But no, we roast, this year we're probably going to roast between 100 and 130,000 pounds of green coffee in 1 year, okay? To put it in context, Tim Hortons roasts 300,000 pounds of coffee a day.
Wow.
Okay, so that shows you how little we are. But the market price, for example, hovers at around $1.20 per pound. Our average price is about $4.70, $4.80 US a pound.
4 times.
4 times market. That's the journey. That's where we are today. When I first started, I was buying coffee from importers, and because I have a good palate, I was getting this coffee or roasting it, and it didn't taste good to me. I was like, this coffee isn't good. Like, it's garbage coffee. And I would ask them, why does it taste like dirt? And they're like, well, that's the way it's supposed to taste. And I was like, really? This is what I signed up for? And so I started to do some research online. It was just around that time, the world of internet, 2006, 2006 was sort of taking off. And I ended up buying, I came across a website called the Especially Coffee Association of Panama. And they had run a national competition that was judged, and then there was 24 different coffee farmers that all their coffees were ranked.
Okay.
And I on an online auction, I bought the 4th best coffee out of Panama in 2007. It was awesome. It was great coffee. Finca Santa Teresa. And then, what changed it for me was they invited me back. They invited me to be a judge the following year in Panama because I'd purchased the coffee. They figured I knew what I was doing. They didn't. I didn't. I faked it. I went to Panama and just pretended.
Yeah.
But I learned a ton. I learned so much working. I was part of 22 different judges from around the world judging coffee in Panama. But more importantly, I ended up on farms. And when I say a farm, I'm talking about people that own a piece of a volcano where coffee grows, because coffee grows on the sides of volcanoes, mostly along the equator belt. And so I ended up visiting some producers. And I came home so inspired by what I saw over there that I basically, I started doing coffee tastings right away when we started Transcend, because we were doing something that no one else was doing. So I knew I had to educate the marketplace.
Yeah.
And I came home from that trip and I made this rash statement saying, by 2012, Transcend will be 100% direct trade. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know the implications of what I was talking about. And
you just felt
that's where I felt that's where we had to go. Because the other thing that's important is that when I first got into coffee, I didn't ever think about where coffee comes from. I was introduced to this idea of seed to cup, that coffee goes on a journey, that it grows someplace and it ends up in your cup. And there's this whole massive supply chain that I didn't ever thought about. And there's so many people involved in that supply chain, and everybody's got to take their little piece. And so the problem with that supply chain is that the grower gets nothing. So coffee is this massive global industry where the growers of coffee are the most impoverished people in the world. And I didn't know that getting into it. And as someone who had a little bit of a social justice bent, I all of a sudden found myself in this business where I was like, what did I do? I got myself involved in this exploitative industry. How do I participate in a way that is going to make it better and not worse? And so when I focused on quality, that was in my brain, that was the thing. It's like, oh, if I can pay more money to producers if they can produce quality. And while it sounds simple, it wasn't. It's not as simple.
So you mentioned direct trade,
Yeah.
and many of us have heard of the term fair trade.
Right.
Coffee. Can you explain what the difference is?
So fair trade is marketing, in all honesty. I'll just say what it is. It's a marketing gimmick. It's not that it doesn't help. It's just that it doesn't help enough. And so fair trade was started in Holland in the early 90s in a very idealistic kind of way. That's what it was about. Is because if the problem with fair trade is this, that you have to be a fair trade, you have to be certified fair trade, right? So the farm or the cooperative has to get certified, get audited. I have to be certified. There's accounting, there's marketing, and the small premium that gets paid for fair trade, that fair trade certification, doesn't really go that far. So if you take right now, for example, the average cost of production, let's say in Costa Rica, for a farmer is $2. So it costs them $2 to grow 1 pound of coffee. The market price right now is $1.20. So they're losing money, and fair trade maybe gives them a 15-cent bump. So while they got a 15-cent bump, they're still losing money.
Right.
And the consumer is misled into thinking that they're doing something great by buying fair trade coffee. When in all honesty, the problem is much bigger than that. The problem is that we still treat coffee as a commodity-based consumable. It's a caffeine delivery mechanism. Coffee needs to go the way of the craft beer, right? We have to stop thinking about coffee like Budweiser and start thinking about it like Deschutes, right?
Okay.
And go, okay, I'm going to pay $12 for this because it's special. Not that all coffee's special, but at least recognize when the coffee is special, when it deserves a better price. So I think we have to shift our focus away from the commodity-based conception of all coffee and start to recognize that there's a category that's different, and that there's something unique.
So what is direct trade in your mind?
So direct trade for me, the problem with direct trade is that there's no standard definition, right? So we still have a commodity-based market. We don't have a specialty classification within the coffee market. And direct trade has really been left up to individual companies to define. So Starbucks doesn't really claim direct trade too much, but like Intelligentsia has direct trade, Counterculture, Stumptown, and they all define it for themselves. For us, I don't really like the word direct trade because even that is misleading to some extent. It suggests that we're doing direct business with a producer, which we are in some ways, but you still need logistics, you still need financing, you still need all these things that go into buying something internationally. So I like the term relationship coffee better, and that's what we've really pursued is building long-term relationships with our growers, with the producers that we work with, and getting to know them and developing relationships of trust so that when we make purchasing decisions, we're confident that we're going to get what we bought, and we also have an opportunity to work together. So for example, Josh Hawken, who works for me, he's worked for me for about 8 years. He's just spent 2 months in Central America, living there, working with farmers, giving them insight from our side of the process, and then also learning from their side of the process. Because we're not farmers, we're not coffee producers, right? So we need to share knowledge and share information.
So that ultimately ensures there's quality, right? What about the price for the producer in your form of direct trade?
We were always focused on direct to retail. That's really what our business was always about. And in my mind, it was a simple thing of, I can pay whatever I want to pay for green coffee as long as the quality's there, because I'm just going to pass that price on to you, the consumer. That's an interesting idea. It doesn't work in real life, because at some point you as a consumer goes, I'm not paying that anymore. So for example, just to put it in context, a 12-ounce bag of whole bean coffee at Transcend costs between $19 and $25 for that bag. So to put that into a pound, that's about $22 to $35 a pound, right? Well, Starbucks is selling coffee for $14 a pound. So from a whole bean side of things, we've employed that model where if we're going to pay a producer $4 US at their farm gate, then we build that into our pricing model, and you pay for that. You as a consumer end up paying that. But there is a limit to where people will go with that. The challenge is on the drink side, the beverage side of things, because what we should really be charging for a latte is probably $8 to $9, but we charge $5 because that's what the market will bear, right?
Right.
If I started charging $9 for a latte, they'd all go somewhere else.
Yeah, fewer hands would go up.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand this from the perspective of the producer. Are you paying that for $74.80?
Yeah.
Then
so we're paying anywhere. It depends. It depends on the quality. It depends where it is, and the cost of production is different for each individual country.
Okay.
But our average price per pound is around $4.70 US.
Yeah.
That's landed. So farm gate would be between $3.50 and $4.25 farm gate. So, but that's still, the farm gate price. So Ricardo Perez in the West Valley of Costa Rica, he's getting $4.25 at his gate for that green coffee. If he was going to sell it to the market, he'd get $1.20. Right.
So the question is, why wouldn't more producers move towards that?
Because they can't produce the quality. Okay. They can't. They don't know how. Coffee is a really interesting thing because it's a fruit that grows on a tree. It's massively at risk because of global warming. The trees are asexual, so they're self-propagating. So basically what happens is in a normal environment, a coffee tree blooms 3 times a year. So let's say in June it starts to rain, and that rain triggers a bloom set, and that bloom turns into fruit. And then that tree will bloom 3 times over the next three months. And then starting in November, as it starts to dry out and it gets into the dry season, that fruit starts to ripen. And so the challenge that you have is that because of that staggered bloom set, you get staggered fruit, and the fruit doesn't ripen at the same time. And so typically what happens is you have migrant workers that come mostly in Central America. They're from Panama. They're Aboriginals from Panama, and they make their way through, and they pick all this coffee, but they're coming through, and so they pick everything that's ripe or unripe. And we live in Edmonton, so everyone knows what unripe fruit tastes like because that's what we buy in grocery stores, right? And it doesn't taste that good. Like I didn't like a peach until I went to, you know, the Okanagan and actually got to pick one off a tree and go, oh, okay, this is what a peach is supposed to taste like.
Right.
And so the same is true with coffee. When you pick unripe coffee, then when you roast it, that lack of ripeness comes through and you get astringency, bitterness, all these negative characters. So when you tell a producer you can only pick ripe cherries, you've just tripled his cost of production. Because now they have to bring pickers back 3 times to their farm. Some producers have their farms picked 5 times, right? So every time you bring someone on to pick, now your cost of production goes up, 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 and up, right? So that's the challenge. So when we demand quality, now we're telling the producer, then we have to be willing to pay more. And frankly, some producers just don't have the capacity to do it. They don't have the ability, right, to do it.
So you started off with this mandate or this mission. And the question that we entertain in this course is, what is sustainable business?
Right.
Is the direction you're headed sustainable? And my immediate thought is, well, there's what you refer to as garbage coffee, right? Like, I know McDonald's is offering free coffee.
Right. That bugs me.
Yeah, like, is it garbage? Or
Well, you know what?
that
Actually,
people are
McDonald's
consuming?
coffee is actually not terrible.
Oh, okay.
It's not terrible. It's probably better than most, actually, on the retail side of it.
Yeah.
They actually, you know, it's not terrible coffee. What I hate about McDonald's is that they're giving it away. And I know they're doing it for a reason. They want to get you in to try it so that you'll come back. But it trivializes the value of the product when you give it away for free. I think the real problem with coffee is that the consumer, the marketplace doesn't understand what drives quality, right? And the challenge with coffee is that it's really difficult to convey that in an authentic way. And so, like most people that have, I don't know, you tell me, does Transcend coffee taste different than the rest, right? Like, do you think it does? You can be honest with me. If you don't think it does, that's fine. But most people, when they drink our coffee, go, like, for example, we just did a tour. There's 5 journalists that were invited by Edmonton Economic Development Corp last week to visit Edmonton and promote Edmonton, to go away and write about Edmonton. And I did a roastery tour for them. And we served some coffee at the start. And this one woman, I didn't realize, but she's like, I've never drank ever coffee black. And so when you handed me that, I'm like looking around for cream and sugar. What do I do with this, right? And so she drank it, and she was like, I've never had anything like this, where it actually tastes sweet and good. And I think that's a challenge, is that you can taste the difference. And we've converted so many people in terms of the quality that we produce, but it's still that thing of, well, it's still it's a product of convenience. Like, well, Transcend's too hard to get to. There's no parking. I'm busy. I'm on my way, so I'm just going to grab a Timmy's or a Starbucks, right? So it's a really competitive marketplace, and to convey quality is difficult. And even when you're successful at it, getting the consumer to buy into it is really difficult.
So what is the sustainability of this? So we know that there's this benefit for the producer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there an environmental side to this?
Yeah, yes and no. Like, there are issues at play. Coffee, as I said, grows along the equator belt because it has to have an average mean temperature to thrive. So by definition, it's a manual labor product, except in Brazil, which is big business and it's all done by machinery. But on the whole, it's all manual. And so most coffee farmers are too poor to worry about fertilizers or even pesticides or herbicides. It doesn't usually get used very much. Right. They don't have access. They don't have enough money to access it. So it's not, there's environmental aspects for sure, but they're not the pressing ones. I think the pressing issues for coffee is, when we talk about sustainability, is livelihoods. Yeah. Right. So most of the people that grow coffee on this planet do so because they don't have a choice. They don't have anything else to grow, and yet they're losing money every year that they continue to work in it. So the marketplace has to recognize that the product that if coffee is important enough, we have to start to be willing to pay more for it. And I think it'll come over time because global warming's frankly going to mess with it. It's going to mess with,
Sure.
sorry, my dumb watch. It's, global warming is going to mess with coffee.
Right.
Because of the need for coffee to have a dry and a wet season, along the equator belt, all the global warming models show that the equator belt's going to turn into a wet zone and just going to rain all the time. The scary part about global trade is that, you know, we're talking about an $80 billion business. That business is based on 0.001% of the genetic diversity on this planet. So 99.99% of the genetic diversity in coffee grows wild in the forests of Ethiopia, which no one has access to. Ethiopia doesn't want to share because they've been given a raw deal with coffee. They're clear cutting thousands and thousands of acres every month. We're losing all that genetic diversity.
Right.
And so we're scrambling as an industry now because we're going, what do we do? The only answer at this point is genetic modification. And of course, that's rife with politics.
Sure.
So we've got this massive industry that's about to collapse on itself because there hasn't been enough forethought into this industry. So in 50 years, I don't know what's going to be.
Right, right.
So sustainability, the question really comes down to how does a producer earn enough money so that they can feed their family, they can educate their kids, they can grow, you know, as a business unit.
Right.
The consumer has to be willing to pay more. But then the challenge is if I'm Tim Hortons and I need to find 300,000 pounds of green coffee tomorrow, so I don't go out of business, I can't be paying what Transcend pays for coffee. It's impossible.
Right.
So for me, the issue around sustainability goes to this idea of, can we be sustainable when we have global markets?
It's a
Or
really
do we have to
interesting-
scale things back and become more local again?
This is an interesting illustration. You know, when I think about coffee wars, I think about Tim Hortons, McDonald's, you know, Starbucks. McDonald's putting out the free coffee, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a massive war going on here to get those customers in.
Yeah.
But you're talking about this even bigger threat, right, to the whole industry, and you're doing your part. But I'm wondering, economically, where does Transcend go? What is the direction that you will go to ensure that you can be around to continue to champion for some of these causes?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. We had as a focus growth that was going to be retail, try to grow our retail market.
You have 7 cafes now?
No, I wish 7. No,
Oh,
actually,
I thought
I'm
you
glad
said
we
it.
don't. No.
Okay.
3.
You have 3?
3,
Okay.
yeah, 3. I'm going to be brutally honest with you. Transcend, it's funny, someone said to me the other day, Transcend's a 10-year overnight success. But you're just getting into this idea of maybe being involved in business. I wasn't joking when I said that I had a backup plan until a year ago. Transcend wouldn't be here today. We would have been bankrupt a long time ago. My idealism in and around paying producers a lot of money for quality is really, really great for the producers. It was terrible for us because we were losing money, hand over fist. And if it wasn't for my business partner, Greg Zeschuk, who was the co-founder of BioWare, the gaming company, when he got out of gaming, he made some money. And he's been a fan of mine for the last 7 years, and so he's bailed us out.
Right.
So I don't even know, to be honest, whether our business model is sustainable.
Okay.
Because the cost, it works on the producing side. Producers are growing and loving getting paid $4 for green when they used to get paid $1.20.
Yeah,
right.
Of course.
But here at home, the challenge is the cost of operating a business, right? So if you look at Garneau, which is a very busy cafe, right? We're struggling to make Garneau efficient enough to do net 10%. And I have people in the business, colleagues, friends of mine in business, they're just like, why would you work that hard to make less than 10% profit, right? And we're not a profit-driven company. We're not a company that's bottom line, but you still have to make enough.
You have
to grow, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's the challenge. And so it's a really interesting coffee coffee, you make money in coffee when you're Tim Hortons and you sell 2,000 cups a day.
Yeah.
When you're Transcend and you sell 200 cups a day, it's really hard to make money, really hard.
Right.
So it's a really tough industry to be a part of, and I don't think, in all honesty, we're not alone. If any specialty coffee company in Canada, whether it's Phil and Sebastian, 49th Parallel, you can list them all, they're all struggling because the volumes just aren't there to cover the cost of how expensive it is to operate.
I appreciate your frankness with this because, you know, often we talk to entrepreneurs who, you know, they are their own biggest fan, right? So they know everything is going to be rainbows and, you know, but when you say that, like, I think, but you also said that, you know, until last year you had this backup plan. So it makes me think, well, what's the bright light here?
I think what's really interesting for us is that the coffee culture in Canada has changed. It's shifted, and there's all of a sudden, you know, we're seeing slow development of food and beverage culture in Edmonton, but that's spreading across the country. And so all of a sudden, you know, because our coffee's done well at competition, we do have competition. Like, there's a World Barista Championship. You probably didn't know that. You probably don't care. But there's a World Barista Championship. It's happening again in this year in Dublin. And Ben Putt, who's one of the co-founders of Monogram Coffee in Edmonton, who uses Transcend coffee, he's competing with our coffee again. So he finished third in the world last year, and he's competing again to represent Canada this year with our coffee. And so that's been a calling card for us. And so all of a sudden now, cafes all across the country are going, hey, we want Transcend coffee. So our business-to-business channel has grown immensely in the last year. And frankly, it's a lot easier than retail. So we're shifting our thinking. Having said that, you know, has anybody heard of Ritchie Market? Have you heard about Ritchie Market coming down the pipe? So Greg Zeschuk is, there's the corner on 76th Ave and 96th Street over in the community of Ritchie, where it's currently under construction. It's going to be open hopefully by the end of Christmas. It's going to house a craft brewery, a restaurant. We're moving our roastery there, cafe. Acme Meats which is one of the best meat cutters in the city. They're moving in. My friend is opening a small bike store there that's going to focus on rentals and fittings. So we're creating this collaborative space. We're going to have an education space. We're going to have a public event space.
Really?
And what I'm excited about is the opportunity to collaborate and build hospitality in terms of culture and community that way, right? So I'm really excited about that. That's going to be
these collaborations with other businesses and then also across Canada with coffee houses.
Yeah, that's sort of our focus, and as well growing online. Obviously, our retail. What we've learned is that people need access or exposure to our product, and before that was limited to Edmonton. But as our coffee has now been pushed across the country in other cafes, we're seeing now our online business go up as well because people have now had a chance to try our product, and now they're coming to us. And we're also really trying to focus this year on the U.S. market, because you buy our product in U.S. dollars. And so we're trying to get into the U.S. market as well.
Okay. Yeah. And so it's taken a number of years to get through kind of these ups and downs of surviving the business, working within the industry.
It's taken 10 years to get to where we are. And in all honesty, it took me 7 years to recognize that I suck at business. I'm brutal. I suck at business. Okay. I'm a dreamer. I'm an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are usually really bad at business. I'm telling you this straight up. If you're an entrepreneur, you're going to suck at business, because we're like a fox that runs down a pathway, and that pathway is our goal for as long as there's nothing that runs across that path. And as soon as a rabbit or a squirrel crosses that path, we chase that squirrel and rabbit. And I did that for 7 years with Transcend, and I dragged my company after squirrels and rabbits in a most destabilizing way. And it took a really good friend of mine to go, you're going to kill yourself and your business if you do not figure out how to stabilize it. And I had to bring in a guy who is everything I hate. I hate lists. I hate structure. I hate being organized. I don't thrive in that environment, but that's what is required to run a business. And, you know, cash flow, budgets, all the stuff that I hated, you know, Michael had to come in and bring that stabilization. And now we're organized, and we're going to be, by the end of this year, 100% cloud-based. And we're focused on customer service, both at business to business to consumers. And it's forced me to sort of get my head wrapped around that as well. But I think the biggest thing I had to learn was I'm terrible at business. And the other side of the equation is you can't do it on your own. There's not one, I defy you to find me one company that's successful out there where one person is in charge.
Right.
It doesn't work. You need a team of people that are going to be committed to the same process and that can fight internally and struggle and yell at each other and refine ideas and go forward. And the entrepreneur's biggest problem is that usually they start small, and as it grows, no one in the organization has the guts to tell the owner that they're wrong. Mm-hmm. And then you end up doing dumb things. And right. I'm a living proof of that. I'm terrible at running businesses.
It's kind of interesting irony that you were in law, dealing with Aboriginal law, gaming industry, and then, you know, obviously not suited for you, finding success in coffee, but now finding real, you know, potential for ongoing success because you've recognized that weakness, and some of the weakness was structure, you know.
Oh yeah, everything I hate is
all those things.
so important, right?
Very cool. Let's take a few questions from students here. So Jessica asking, weren't you concerned about competition like Tim Hortons and Starbucks? What makes you different from those big names?
You know what, it's a good question, actually, and in all honesty, they are competition. I was idealistic enough and probably arrogant enough to think that they weren't competition. I used to say all the time that Transcend, I don't know if it still gets used in business. There's a book out there called Blue Ocean Strategy.
In their fourth year, they'll get
Fourth year, okay. Yeah. So in the fourth year, you're going to get this book called Blue Ocean Strategy. And it's basically what it talks about is a blue ocean and a red ocean. The red ocean is red with the blood of competition, so Coke and Pepsi, hammering it out. And the blue ocean is clear of that blood because you're doing something so different that you don't have competitors. So the examples they used was Starbucks in the early days, or Cirque du Soleil. Right? Cirque du Soleil was so unique as a circus that it defied the industry, right? So I always used to say that Transcend was a blue ocean company. We didn't have any competition because we were doing something so different. But then I would always put a caveat on that. Because we're in Edmonton, the ocean was frozen solid, and I was moving very slowly, right? So I think we are more aware now that the marketplace is crowded with competition. We are doing something different. The challenge is, again, as I said earlier, communicating, getting the consumer to understand the difference. Mm-hmm. And I think what I've seen happen in different cities is the more independent cafes, the more independent coffee shops that pop up, that's more opportunity for consumers to be confronted with an alternative. Right. And then given that opportunity, they experience something different. Yeah. But when it was just Transcend, we were too small. Yeah. We just didn't have, people couldn't get access to us. So I'm a big fan of competition on that side of the equation because sure. more independents are good, right? Because we still have such a small market share, right? Yeah. Yeah. I think that my palate is what drove that. And so when I got into coffee, even though I didn't know what quality looked like or even how to get it, yeah. my distaste for bad pushed me forward constantly. I was constantly trying to figure out where do I get better quality coffee because I can't stand drinking what I have in my mouth right now.
These palates, so you develop them.
Totally.
Right? It's not a natural born thing.
No, it's not.
But the drive to understand was really what caused you to do that. Okay. Here's a question from Belinda. What were some of the biggest struggles that you've had in the last 10 years with your business?
Me.
Yourself.
Getting out of the way. You know what? You're going to hear it 100 times, thousands of times probably as you go through school. You're going to hear the adage, cash is king. cash flow. Cash flow it's the most boring and most terrifying thing about business. It's made me gray. It's probably aged me. There's nothing more terrifying when you're a business owner to be looking at your bank account and then being confronted with payroll in 3 days, right? That's terrifying. It's terrifying to go, I've got $80,000 to pay out, and there's only $40,000 in the bank. What do I do, right? So cash flow is being undercapitalized is really, really, it's the death nail for most businesses. Most businesses fail because they grow. So success, what you want in business is success. You want to grow, but that's what kills most businesses, is that they start to grow and they don't have the capital to run that business anymore, and they die because they can't fund their growth. It's ironic, but it's true.
Well, I really appreciate the sincerity and honesty of all the advice and stories that you've been telling us today. So I hope you guys have benefited from learning from Paul. Join me in thanking Paul, Mark.